Today I'm going to show you how I did the roofing on my small off-grid cabin. This is the second video. I actually did a framing video before if you've seen that, and this is where we left off. Here's a quick preview of what my finished roof looks like. I chose to go with a raised rib roof mostly because it was what was in stock on island. I stood in Lowe's for a long time trying to pick out all of the needed accessories. They did have most of the things in brown, like the ridge cap and, of course, the roofing panels. These are 3-foot wide, 8-foot long roofing panels. But the drip edge, they had the smaller drip edge in brown, but the larger one for the eaves, they only had in blue, which is the blue that I originally wanted. I thought about making a two-toned roof, but I ended up putting the blue back and getting the smaller drip edge also for the eaves. Backing up a bit, what I did first was take plywood like you see there standing and cut that to size and put it up on the roof, screwed it into the frame, and then I covered with the roofing paper, the tar paper there that you see. Basically what I wanted was not raw metal above our heads at night in the loft because metal obviously is much colder. We are in Hawaii where it's pretty warm most of the time, but up here, this particular site is at about 4,200 feet above sea level, so it does get pretty cold, especially in the winter. Here is a shot from the inside where you can see the plywood in place. Here's some of the tar paper rolled out onto the plywood on the roof. I used a staple gun for most of it to fasten it to the wood. Here you can see where I stapled also the sides. I did make a little bit of overhang for each of these so it would cover up the plywood edges. And for safety, since we were out in the middle of nowhere, I had my friend Yvonne again helping. Two things that you can see in this picture. I did put a brace at the bottom of the fascia there so that way I could stand and also make sure that the plywood wouldn't slide off the wood as I was screwing it in, or off the roof as I was screwing it in. So it did hold the plywood in place and help me maneuver that a little easier. And then I started adding the furring strips, or some people will call these purlins as well, but the furring strips are where the metal roof will attach to. So I used 2x4s on the sloped roof, which is actually a 45-degree 12-12 roof, and then for the lesser slope of the dormer roofs, I did just use 1x4s for up there. It's not a lot of roofing. It was kind of perfect though. I was able to use one panel on each of these sections. Here's a shot from above of the furring strips onto the tar paper. Here's one quick shot backing up before all the furring strips were on this side. You can see the paper and my braces there to hold the plywood. And then also you'll notice that I put it upwards a little bit on the side of the dormers. I do put a dormer piece underneath that tar paper that's kind of flapped up there to try to keep the water not inside the cabin. Dormer sides, the triangles that are the most challenging. So here I did a layout. I basically used my drawings on graph paper to figure out what the dimensions roughly would be, and then I could cut a little bit more on site if needed. You see a rough chalk line on some older OSB that I have there. Here I had cut them out, and if you've seen the first video, you'll see how I drew out the rafters on my driveway here, and the lines again were very helpful so I could lay out the dormer side pieces and just make sure that they roughly would fit on the side of the framing. Primed with Kilz primer. Here my son is painting the dormer sides. I thought everybody wants to make kind of a perfect looking cabin, or a lot of people do, I guess. I really wanted my son to be involved in this process and enjoy the process and not feel like I was so focused on the cabin that I was not involving him or ignoring him. And here they are again, bright and cheery. And here's one of the dormer sides in place. And one more shot of the dormer triangle. So here you can see pretty much all the furring strips in place on top of the tar paper, the dormer sides as well, and almost ready for roofing. I do have to remove those braces to be able to get the roofing on because the roofing panels will overhang slightly on the ends, but it's pretty much ready to go. And there's my helper Yvonne. She was fantastic, and my son looking out the windows. Oh, forgot, not quite finished. I did put side pieces there. I actually just used some 2x2s because that's what I had lying around to close up the sides. If you see there, it's up between the furring strips. I put those so that way the wind and rain wouldn't just blow sideways up underneath the roofing, kind of close it up a little bit. And there, those side pieces again are in place now. Here is the inside with the plywood. As I mentioned, I didn't want it to be too cold under the metal roof. And just for anyone who hasn't experienced a metal roof, this is actually at my house where I do all the main, prepping work and things. This is our deck, so you can see underneath of a metal roof if you don't have anything there, just straight metal, so it can be pretty cold. So metal roofing, I bought 6 sheets of the 8-foot long by 3 feet wide, and had to cut 2 of those sheets to a much shorter length for the dormer sides, and then the other 4 sheets I did have to cut to length a little bit as well. So here you can see the cut pieces. I used a circular saw to do the cutting, and it had a metal blade. I put a metal blade on the circular saw. I did burn through the batteries super fast on doing this. So you have to go slow and sparks flying. It wasn't my favorite thing to do, but did go through about 5 batteries. Just needed to recharge, but it used up the batteries really quickly. I was able to cut all 4 sheets at the same time for the longer sheets, and then the 2 sheets were easy to do at the same time. So I clamped them together to make them all nice and the same. Here I have all of my roofing and some plywood on top of it to keep it safe underneath the ladders. I've got everything all tied together there, and this is the first day I didn't have my son with me. He was with Dad. And again, this is the starting point with all the furring strips and the tar paper and everything in place ready for the roofing. I made a number of learning mistakes in this whole process, and one of them was putting the ridge cap on top of the roofing panels. It was vibrating the entire ride, didn't know that, and as you can see, it scratched up the entire panel underneath. So I got some Rust-Oleum paint and repaired it as best I could, but obviously if you avoid this mistake, it can save you a little bit of a headache. Another mistake I did that day was when I was getting the roofing panels out. I tried to do it all together and they were pretty heavy. And then, of course, it slid out of the truck and scratched up the back of my truck. Here I'm putting drip edge on the side of the dormer. I also put drip edge on the eave area. Here's a top shot. You can see the edge of the drip edge. Clearly, I am not an expert at this. This is my first time doing any of this, and I'm YouTube and internet taught, and I would also recommend knowing where all your screws are underneath. So here I hit a screw underneath on the furring strip, and so the roofing screw wouldn't go in, and I ended up with a hole in the roof, which I later patched, and I'll show you that too. You can't see the hole when I put my hand here, but I did patch it up with some roofing silicone there. It wasn't the only hole that I had, but most of the roofing went pretty successfully. So I did screw on the roof, you can see there, per the manufacturer instructions next to the ribs. You will see different recommendations depending on the kind of roofing that you get. So my roof at home is the regular corrugated kind, and often you'll see people say to screw through the peaks so that way you don't have leaks. This one did say to screw into the flat next to the ribs. Here's just a quick shot of my roof at home where you can see that they screwed through the peaks when building our house. First panel is up on the dormer. And just in time, my friend Kyra arrived, help arrived. This was really great because she was able to help pass me up things. And then also the roofing panels are kind of heavy and awkward when you're carrying them up a ladder and trying to get them in place. So it was a big help to have Kyra that day. The roofing was a little bit wide for the main steeper parts of the roof, and also wanted to have a little bit of flashing or something to be able to guide the water down onto the roofing and not into the dormer crease there, as well as have the roofing overhang kind of where Kyra is there in the background. So what we did is cut the roof right at the edge of the dormer with tin snips and bend it upward. It was not easy to do, but then I'm going to screw that section there that you see, the ugly piece kind of flapping up, into the side of the dormer to try to help with water management there. And then it still gave a good amount of overhang on the other side where the furring strips hang over the edge of the roof. Here we're working on bending up that little section that I snipped for the dormer. Here we're doing it again. With Kyra's help that day, we managed to get up 4 of the roofing panels. So you see 2 of the steeper panels in the background and the 2 less steep panels over the dormers. A little bit more of a gap than I wanted on the ridge, but the ridge cap covers all of that, so still hopefully will be okay. Here's another shot from below. And this is how the roof overhang looked on the furring strips. Here I'm installing the drip edge that's for the eaves. I'm not too worried about the overhang right there of the paper. I will be trimming that, and then I'm going to put the gutters because I'm going to do rainwater catchment on the cabin. So most of that will get covered up on the fascia. The last 2 panels I had to do by myself. I did not have help that day, so I did some scaffolding. Basically, Kyra actually had the great idea, and she had given me quite a while back some 16-foot 4x4s, a couple that they had lying around for a long time. So what I did is put the 16-foot 4x4s through the frame and screwed them into the side of the window there, and then also to the main top caps of the walls, and then also strapped them down and put a couple of boards across. You'll see here in a second. Here you can see how the 4x4s went through the cabin. Here's looking out the window at the 4x4 sticking out, and I put a couple of 2x6s across, screw those in so I could stand on that, work on the ridge cap, do a little bit of extra insulating. It was really, really helpful. Here I'm standing on those 2x6s that are a part of the scaffolding. For any of you feeling like you're juggling so many things and would not have time to do this, or it would be really hard, I just want to let you know it is hard. I also have a full-time job, and sometimes that meant I was doing a little bit of work up at the cabin. Luckily there's signal even though it's off-grid and kind of far away from things. And you know, my son's playing with screws, eating lunch, eating snacks at the cabin. So I was definitely trying to juggle a lot of things when doing this, and it was stressful at times, but very rewarding too. Here's just a brief shot of the screw pattern. I got the ridge cap up and clamped in place. That was also a little bit tough. So the ridge caps come in 10-foot length, and the cabin again is 8 foot wide. So, but I did get a 10-foot ridge board as well because I needed a little bit wider for the overhanging, you know, outrigger rafters. So it worked out. I ended up leaving the ridge cap hanging over, and I think it protects the ridge board a little bit too. Here is the ridge cap in place. I've screwed it already down to the steeper parts, and as you can see, another hole in the ridge cap which I patched up, and this I screwed onto the peaks of the roofing below. Here's a bit of how the dormer side turned out. Not ideal. I really wanted the roofing part below to be underneath the drip cap above, but it was just too hard to try to maneuver underneath there, so just screwed it over top, and I'm going to seal up in that area. Here you can see pretty much the finished panels on the roof and the ridge cap in place. Here's one more angle on the next day. You can see the drip edges from the eave side hanging way over. I do plan to trim those later. And final shot of the roof. What I did do after this, I forgot to show too the closure strips I did put on the bottom side on top of the furring strips, between, you know, the furring strips and the metal roof, but there were not the opposite closure strips available at the store. They were out of those. So on the top under the ridge cap, I didn't have closure strips, and I ended up using that Great Stuff insulation, just that spray foam insulation, and spraying it up into each of those gaps under the ridge cap. And finally, here's a preview of next time, where I'm going to put the siding on. I'll show you how I did siding and windows and trim. So thanks for watching again. Again, it's possible for anybody to do this. Just learn as much as you can online. Lots of great resources to review. So thanks for watching.